Hi, this is Brian Stevens from SPYPOINT, and I'm excited to talk with Kent Weil, professional trapper, today. Kent is involved in the National Trappers Association and is also an outdoor writer. I've been a fan of the art of trapping for many years and looking forward to learning some strategies today, not only for our audience, but also for myself. Hope you enjoy the podcast. Welcome to the SPYPOINT Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Stevens, and on this show, we get to talk about hunting, tactics, technology, and the inside scoop from industry pros. Follow along each month as we learn, laugh, and grow together with the passion we all have for the outdoors. This is the SPYPOINT Podcast. Welcome to the podcast today, Kent. How you doing, my friend?
Thanks, Brian.
Doing all right?
Yep. It's weather's a little screwy here today, but hey, that's winter.
That's winter, and I think we still got a few more months of this squirrely, and then we get into one of my favorite times of the year, the spring. So I'm sure that you're looking forward to that as well.
Actually, I'm kind of a winter guy because of the trapping.
That's true. That's true. Okay. Check on that. I hear you. I think I'm ready for turkey season. You're still in trapper mode. I got you.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, perfect. Listen, we got a great podcast today. We're going to talk about trapping, and I know you're part of the National Trappers Association as well as an outdoor writer. So before we jump into some of the topics, maybe we could level set with everybody about how you got into trapping, your involvement with the Trappers Association, and, what are some of the, platforms that you do some outdoor writing for?
No. Wow. As far as getting into trapping, I think I first set my first trap in 1967.
Oh, okay.
And I just turned 64 a couple years ago, or a couple days ago. Anyway, I got involved with trapping because I listened to my grandfather's stories about, one of them particularly, he caught a mink during the Depression, and it fed his family. They lived on a farm, so they didn't need much, but it fed his family for a month. So it was just really intriguing to me. So I got started doing that. And of course, that naturally involved the wanting to protect and, if possible, expand trapper rights. So I got involved in some of the organizations that are out there. I'm an officer right now in the National Trappers Association. And I also belong to Fur Takers of America, which is the second national organization. And then probably more importantly, I belong to our state organization. I'm a director in the Illinois Trappers Association. It's like anything that gets political. It's the state and local is where it all happens. So we've been very instrumental in not only protecting trapping rights, but expanding them. We lobbied for and got an otter season in 2012, and then in 2016 we got a bobcat season. So we've been doing a good job.
That's outstanding. And then what do you do? Where do you publish, and who do you write for?
What got me started was writing for Illinois Outdoor News.
Okay.
Those people in the Midwest might be familiar with them. I think they've got outdoor news publications, I think, in 7 states. And that's the main thing I do. I've written, I wrote a column on legislative action in Trappers Post, which is one of the national magazines. And I've written for American Trapper, which is the publication for the National Trappers Association. I've had articles in Trappers World. I'm trying to think what else. Just various trapping magazines mainly. My interest is in promoting trapping as a writer. So
gotcha.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah. And there's an educational component to it. So listen, it's clear you've had a long, successful career in trapping, and it has done, I would love to, talk about the benefit to game management and other populations. And you clearly have just a ton of experience in that area. So let's jump right in. So the first thing I think would be important not only for the audience, but I think for myself as well, is really just talk more at a high level from a trapping standpoint. Maybe things that, people don't understand around, the impact on predator numbers and, game management and unchecked, predators and fur bearers and, what they can do on game animals that we all love to chase and or just, have as part of the outdoors. So, let's start with that and we'll dig a little bit deeper, but just more of it at a high level.
Well, to start off, I guess we need to talk a little bit about the North American model of game management, which is revered in the world. I mean, it's the best model for game managers anywhere. And the idea is a scientific model that's promoting using various components to manage wildlife. Sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And trapping is a very important component of that. Mainly for what exactly you were talking about, the impact on various game animals, not to mention, lots of birds and mammals that have nothing to do with hunting.
Correct.
But certainly game animals like ducks or quail or turkeys, all of the upland game that we're all familiar with in waterfowl can take a tremendous hit from various fur bearers, most of which are predators. Certainly, I saw one study just recently on raccoons and quail management, and raccoons were destroying 92% of the nests.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a study out of Alabama, where 60% of the deer fawns are taken by coyotes. So, I mean, what's that do to your recruitment rate, right?
No question.
Certainly, I think some of your listeners might be familiar with Delta waterfowl. They've been doing some predation studies. And you read down the list of major predators on duck nests, and it reads like a fur bear list with red fox, coyotes, skunks, badgers, mink. I mean, they all take an awful lot of duck nests, ducklings, and actually nesting hens themselves. So they claim that the biggest thing you can do to raise duck numbers in the prairie pothole region is control predators. And that's where trappers play a very important role, because to pay professionals to do this it's just not a valid model. I mean, there isn't the money to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So trappers do it mostly voluntarily, either because they really like doing it, or they're selling the pelts, or they themselves hunt deer or ducks and they're trying to manage the, for a bigger fawn recruitment, or more ducks, more quail, whatever.
No, that makes complete sense. So what are some of the big misconceptions? And you talk about the scientific model and the fact that there is science-based relative to how to properly trap. I'm sure there are certain numbers that need to be, evaluated as far as, predators per game animals, those kind of things. But what are some misconceptions that people have around trapping and the necessity for it that you've run across over the years?
Well, I guess the biggest thing that you get when especially if you listen to the animal rights people, is that it's cruel, and it's really not. There is organizations out there that are pushing for what we call best management practices, and they study the traps and the techniques, and then they push whatever model seems to be least harmful to the animal. For example, we've just, in the last few decades, we've come up with dog-proof traps, which are mainly for raccoons, and they're a little cylinder with a spring and a little, a little piece of wire to catch the paw, and the animal sticks its hand in the trap, this little cylindrical trap, pulls up on a trigger on the bottom, and it catches them around the wrist. and it's like a pair of handcuffs, and does no more damage than a pair of handcuffs, actually.
Correct.
The same thing with the leg hole traps. Everybody has this old misconception of, traps with teeth. Well, those haven't been illegal in 100 years. And there's been a tremendous amount of research in traps. Trappers don't like causing any more suffering for an animal than anybody else does, than any other hunter does, know?
Yep.
So our goal is to hold the trap, to hold the animal in the trap till we can get there with no damage to the foot, as little discomfort to the animal as possible. And we've been pretty successful. Put it this way: the Europeans who buy some of our fur and who are notoriously much more anti-hunting, anti-trapping than we are, they're relatively comfortable with our best management practices. So, I mean, that's where we stand today. The misconceptions on trapping, I think, are normally based on cruelty. And that's really not what we do.
Yep.
I don't think our methods are any more cruel than, like I said, you're just restraining an animal.
Absolutely. So then let's now jump into the other side of it. So the positive side of it for other animal populations, when you are able to control predation in certain predators, are there certain statistics or anything you can share that we can talk about the positive aspects of doing what you do and what other trappers do for game management and just animals in general?
Well, I talked about some of the studies earlier, and there's hundreds and hundreds of studies like that out there, and it doesn't take too much. You can just go on Google and pull a lot of them up if you want to read about them. But they're all tied in with usually the state DNR, because they're the ones that are promoting trapping as much as we are. Because without that tool, they're in trouble. We talked about predation, and trappers are very conscious of the fact that a raccoon just doesn't eat duck eggs; it eats whatever bird eggs, whatever mammals it can run across, that it can subdue and kill and eat. They can be very destructive. You have otter populations which have exploded in Illinois. We had a very successful reentry of otters back in the 90s, and which, by the way, those otters were all caught with a foothold trap because for these studies, these transfer studies, that is typically the only really reasonable way to catch these animals and then move them someplace where they need to be reared is.
Unharmed. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So trapping plays an integral role on a whole bunch of different levels. Certainly stuff like these otter repopulations, which have happened in a lot of the Midwest, and most of the animals were trapped in the South, where otters are fairly prevalent, caught, like I said, in a foothold trap, and then transported up and released in these various states. That's all been paid for mostly by sportsmen. Pitney Robertson Act, which is the excise tax on guns and firearms and ammunition and such, paid for most of these studies, actually.
No, that's great. That's great. So, that's like our baseline foundation of it. So if you were to talk to, or somebody came to you and said, listen, Ken, I want to get started in trapping. I've got a piece of property. I know I have a lot of predators. What would be, the starting place as far as just strategy, equipment, when to do it, what are some best practices, and what are some common mistakes that you would want them to avoid? Again, somebody just getting into it brand new.
You couldn't pick a better time in my lifetime anyway to start trapping. When I first started, information was very closely held. You didn't have the internet, and for somebody starting without a mentor that's actually helping them, it was really hard. You do a lot of trial and error, and most things don't work, and you pick the few things that do, and you move on. But today, with the internet, and also a sea change in the way veteran trappers are treating new people coming into the field, is just, the difference is just amazing. You can go on YouTube and find literally thousands and thousands of how-to videos on trapping. The organizations, like I said, the state associations and national associations promote entry-level trapping. They have demonstrations, and everybody's willing to talk to you. It's just incredibly different than what it used to be. That said, probably if you're here in the Midwest, I'm not sure exactly where your audience is, but the easiest thing to probably start trapping is raccoons. They're pretty much everywhere. They're easy to trap, and the equipment is simple and easy to use. I think I mentioned earlier that you've got dog-proof traps now. Those are a very good way to get started trapping because they're just simple, and raccoons use them very readily. And of course, there's none of this. It holds the trap, it holds the animal without a lot of damage, and you can release the animal if you want, if it's too small. That would probably be my advice. The other area is, some of the water trapping is relatively easy, but it requires a lot more equipment.
Mm-hmm.
You can go out and set a dog-proof trap literally with a cable extension to go around a tree and a trap and some bait. That's all you need.
So just to clarify, so that for those that may not know, explain a dog-proof trap.
Okay. I mentioned it a little earlier. What it is a metal cylinder, probably a little over an inch in diameter, and it's got a trigger at the bottom. Typically, for a true dog-proof, the trigger has to be pulled up, which is what raccoons will do naturally. It's got a spring, and at the top, it's got a little U-shaped piece of wire. And when the trigger's pulled, the U-shaped wire pulls back and locks on the animal's foot, just a little bit above the wrist.
Got it. Okay.
And literally, you can set them as simple as the bait can be as simple as just some dog food or some cat food that you pour down in the hole. Set the trap, wire it off or cable it off or however you make sure it's not going to go anywhere. Bait the trap and move on. You can literally make a set in a couple minutes.
Okay. All right. So, very helpful. Some people have, different types of property, different sizes of property. So, are there different strategies, based on raccoon versus a coyote? So let's just talk a little bit about that. I mean, I think you hit the raccoons are a good place to start. I'm sure virtually all of our audience that hunts deer or other types of, game has a coyote problem. How do you focus on that for small tracks versus big tracks of managing the coyotes?
Well, obviously, the larger track you've got to deal with, the better you can manage whatever population of coyotes is in the area. The problem with coyotes, as opposed to raccoons, is they've got a huge home range area. A raccoon might live on as little as 40 or 50 acres, where a coyote might be roaming around 10 square miles. So the trick with coyotes is identifying those places where they are traveling, any kind of choke points where any coyote in the area will travel through, or various areas that are just, I don't know, the coyote likes them. You might find a place where you've got 3 or 4 sets of droppings. Well, obviously, the coyote is coming through there on a regular basis. It's a great place to make a set. The travel paths, though, are where you're going to catch most of your coyotes. And that's where a lot of the art comes in. The mechanical aspect of setting the trap isn't tough. Anybody can do that. But the art of making the set and the art of choosing the location are probably the biggest factor in whether you're going to be successful or not.
So what might some of those be that help you ensure that you'll have success versus what are some mistakes that people might make or not be aware of that, result in, just not getting the animal they're after?
Mm-hmm. I would say that the main thing as far as the location is to concentrate on edges. Coyotes are an edge animal. Because that's where their prey is.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got some place where a couple or three fence rows come together, or you've got a grassway maybe that's separating two fields, those are likely travel ways. And you would probably, there's places that I set up every year whether I see sign of coyotes using it or not, simply because historically I know that's where coyotes are going to be. All that takes a little time, and you have to do a little trial and error on your part to determine whether those locations are going to be successful. As far as making the set is concerned, there's thousands of YouTube videos out there that'll show you how to do it. But I will tell you from personal practice and watching other people, nobody does it the same. Everybody does it a little different. And something that I do that's very successful for me might not work for another guy for whatever reason.
Sure.
So get out. The best thing I can tell people is to get out there and just do it. And the other thing that I will note is if a location is good enough for one set, it's good enough for two or three.
Gotcha.
Don't be afraid to use more traps.
Gotcha.
Gang setting locations is the people that really put up big numbers. That's what they do.
Got it. And I would imagine road sections are another one that, are popular and can be, highly productive from a set standpoint and trapping.
Road sections, explain to me a little bit.
Road intersections.
Oh, yes. Now, the tricky part with that is in a lot of states, such as Illinois, you cannot set any right-of-way, public right-of-way.
Got it.
So you would have to have permission from the landowner to back off a little bit from a place like that and make sets on private property.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm talking more maybe,
I would like.
What about like logging roads on the property?
Perfect.
That was more of what I should have clarified. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The coyotes are going to run all of those. Assuming that there's prey animals in the area, or the logging road is being used to connect two really good prey areas where they're using, and they're just using the logging road to go back and forth.
Gotcha.
But a lot of farm lanes are the same way. You'll have a lot of farm lanes, out in the fields that they're just running between two fields, or running between a pasture and a field. And coyotes definitely will run those. Fox too. I mean, don't discount that.
Sure. What about pond dams? What is your experience?
I like pond dams.
Okay.
My start was in water trapping. The first animals I trapped were muskrat.
Okay.
So I got used to pond dams a lot. What you find a lot about pond dams is they're used as a crossover point for a lot of animals other than just the water animals. They're deadly on coon because coon like the water.
Absolutely.
And they're good for muskrat, mink, otter. I've even caught bobcat on dams.
Okay. Visit spypoint.com/insiders to learn all about the new SPYPOINT Insiders Club that gets you incredible discounts on things like photo transmission plans and accessories, free shipping from spypoint.com, exclusive content and giveaway access, and the most advanced mobile scouting tools SPYPOINT has to offer. That's spypoint.com/insiders. No, absolutely. So one of the other things I wanted to just touch base before we move on to, from this coyote topic, and that is human scent. What is your philosophy as it relates to human scent and setting the trap and the impact that that has on a coyote being willing to come in and make that that final move to have the trap set?
A coyote has like 1,000 times the scent receptors that a human being does. There is nothing you can do that will keep that coyote knowing that you were there.
Okay. So do you do anything?
It's kind of like deer hunting. I mean, you can try to get rid of your scent as much as possible, but it's still there.
Yep.
And if you got a deer focused on a particular spot, it's likely if the wind's right, it's going to smell you.
Yeah.
Well, same way with a coyote. It knows you've been there. But there's people everywhere. If a coyote got spooked every time it smelled human scent, it wouldn't survive very long. So that said, you want to direct the scent at a set so that it's not a distraction.
Got it.
I'll set a trap with bare hands for coyote. That doesn't really bother me that much. What I'm more concerned about scent is the bait and lure and maybe urine you're using as an attractor. That needs to be just exactly where you want it to be, so that the coyote has to come over the trap in order to check out these various scents. So you want to be very careful about any kind of cross-contamination. You certainly don't want your trap to have any scent of the lure on it. Otherwise, you're directing that coyote's attention to that trap, which is not what you want.
Correct. You don't want to educate them on that.
You certainly don't want them to pay a lot more attention to where the trap is than they are to pay attention with some kind of food that they want to get to.
Correct.
So I use a separate set of gloves only when I'm using bait and lure, and that's the only time they get used. I just am very careful about cross-contamination.
Got it. Okay. Super helpful. And it's some of those things, those details that are very important that may determine, your success or not by paying attention to some of those things. So that's very helpful. And I know, there's a lot of different philosophies on how trappers, have theories on scent. So that's just, again,
there's as many philosophies as there are trappers. I'm here to tell you.
Yep. No. And like you said, pull a few that seem to work and then run with it and trial and error and, see what works for you and the property that you're trying to manage. So, but again, I think those are some good conceptual best practices and things for people to keep in mind, especially for those that are getting started into trapping. So I appreciate you sharing that. So quick question. Go ahead.
One more thing I'd like to add. We talked about gang trapping, and one of the other great things about putting maybe 3 sets in an area is you can try different things at the 3 different sets at the same time. So your learning curve is not quite as steep. You just want to be careful not to mix up too many different things at the same time, or you're never going to be able to tease out which one was working and which one isn't.
No, but that's a great idea. That allows you to do a little bit of evaluation and a little research project and see again what seems to be working. So that's a great feedback.
Try different types of sets. Try different types of setting techniques. Whether you're setting the trap right on the edge of like a dirt hole, if you're setting it right on the edge of the hole, or you're setting it 8 or 9 inches back. I mean, you can try different baits, different lures, different combinations, and you'll find something that works very well for you in your particular area. It just takes a little trial and error.
Okay. What is speaking of trial and error, what is your favorite bait for coyotes and coons?
Well, my favorite bait for coyotes is meat-based bait. It's a tainted meat bait that is made mostly with bobcat. And I've been very successful with that. I advise people not to use just one bait. I would have at least another that you use as a change-up. I use another bait that's also meat-based. I think lure manufacturers and bait manufacturers are very careful to keep secret what's in their baits and lures. But I'm pretty sure that this one's was mostly ground mice and beaver casters. So it's a real different kind of bait than the other one that I use. And like if I'm doing 2 traps at a location, I'll use different baits.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yep.
What about skunk fat?
Skunk scent?
Yeah.
For coyotes?
Yes.
They love it. You want to be careful with it. Too much is, well, it's too much. I like it as a call lure rather than putting it actually on the set itself. I'll find a little tree or a stick or piece of grass or something that's, up a couple or 3 feet in the air and smear a little bit on it, because that gets out into the wind. The coyotes wind it. They're interested in skunks, so they'll follow it hopefully to your trap, and then get more interested in the lure and bait that you've got actually at your set. Skunk carcasses, a buried skunk carcass can make a great coyote bait. It's an old set. You'll see it in a lot of the old books, and it still works. They really like skunks for some reason.
For some reason. Okay. Well, that's good. So when you trap, and you get, whether it's raccoons or coyotes, bobcats, what do you do, with the game that you trap?
Well, it depends on what it is, of course. Like if I catch beaver, especially if they're younger beaver, we keep every beaver carcass we get hold of, because they're great to eat. I know people have eaten pretty much just anything that's out there. There are things I would steer away from, things that I don't have too much trouble with. A roasted raccoon that's been made like into pulled barbecue is pretty good. I've known people that have eaten coyote back straps.
Okay.
I'll try it. I'm skeptical, but I'd try it if somebody puts it.
Okay. And then obviously you do things with the pelts, and you sell those. Okay.
And a lot of people, make a few extra dollars. They'll sell the skulls. Certainly things like, if you catch a lot of coyotes, you need to be harvesting the glands and the urine. I mean, there's a market for that.
Okay.
The biggest market, I guess, is probably beaver caster. Beaver are very territorial, and they use caster to mark their territory. And the caster is used in baits and lures. Like I said, every predator likes beaver. But it's also used in the perfume industry as a base, which I don't think a lot of people know. And it's gotten very expensive. I think Fur Harvesters Auction was doing private treaty sales for them last fall, and they were getting about $110 a pound.
Wow.
To give you an example, a big beaver with really full caster sacks might have 3 to 4 ounces. So it doesn't take too many beaver before you've got a pound of caster.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
And skunk. We were just talking about skunk.
Yeah.
Get yourself a syringe and a glass bottle with a metal lid and syringe out the essence. It brings $15 to $20 an ounce, and a skunk that hasn't sprayed will have half an ounce of skunk essence.
And what is that for?
They use it. We were just talking about for trappers. They use it. The bait and lure manufacturers.
Oh, okay, gotcha. It's for for bait. Got it. Makes total sense. Super helpful information. So let's transition into a story that you might have, or a particular predator that has evaded you over a period of time that you still think about to this day, and then how did you ultimately pull it off, if you were able to finally pin that animal down and get it trapped?
Well, you try not to think too much about the ones that get away. Probably one of the more recent things that happened was my first experience at trapping otter. Like I said, we we got our first otter season since 1929 in Illinois in 2012. Well, there's nobody that I could go to in Illinois that had ever trapped it, otter in Illinois. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So you start talking to people in other states, and what you find with the otter is even if you're in a location where there seems to be a lot of them, they travel. So if you're trapping a pond that has a lot of otter sign in it, there may not be an otter come through there for a couple of weeks. So I didn't really, I think, quite understand that. I had a friend of mine that has a series of ponds, and they were complaining about the otter basically cleaning all the catfish out. So they asked me to trap it. So I get out there and I see tons of otter sign. So I set a bunch of traps, and I'm thinking, wow, this is going to be easy. First year otter trapping, I'm going to clean up, right? Well, not. The first thing that I neglected to think about was there's a lot of raccoons out in that area. And the otter came through the second night that I was there, but there were raccoons in my traps, so there were no working traps. So that was disappointing.
Yep.
So I started gang setting all these pond dams to try to take out as many of the raccoons as I could before so I'd have something working when the otter came through.
Sure.
Well, I was there this is about 65 miles from me, and I'm staying at a deer camp, and I've only got I think it was 10 or 11 days before deer season started, and I had to clear out. Well, I'm running traps, and I'm running traps, and I'm running traps, and no otter. So I go home, and I left a few traps that were in really good locations. Like I said, I'd cleaned most of the coon out by that time, so I wasn't too worried about that. And he said he'd check them during deer season. And then I would come the following Monday and basically pull all the traps because it's, like I said, it's 65 miles away, and I've got other things that I've moved on to at that point. Well, it was very disappointing. I hadn't caught any otter, and my buddy, when he called in, he told me that there was nothing. So I come back Monday to pull traps, and I'm pretty discouraged. The only place that I had to trap otter, and I really made a good hack at it, but no otter. And so I'm starting to pull traps, nothing. I mean, I'm catching coon at that point. I pretty much cleaned them out. And I get to the last trap, and there's my first otter. So I guess the moral of that story is you got to have patience if you trap.
Yep.
Because all the animals have different patterns. I was absolutely ecstatic. I had that otter mounted. It's one of the first otters caught in the state of Illinois since 1929.
That's super cool. That's super cool, Kent.
The other little aside to that is my wife usually ran traps with me, and she didn't come that day. And so I got to send the perfect text to her with a picture.
Very cool.
You otter have been here.
And now she can look at it every day.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you one more question. And you talked about information and, that's available today versus what you had in the past. There's another part of that technology. So you talk about, or I'd love you to talk about, how do you use a trail camera just from a standpoint of, getting coyotes patterned, and how do you utilize them as just a tool as part of your trapping strategy?
Well, there's a number of different ways. I mean, it's like any other part of hunting. I mean, people are coming up every day with different ways to strategize using a trail cam so they can look at places when they're not there. And I know a lot of trappers are using them. They'll set them up basically just to see if what looks like a really good travel location for coyote Is it really? Well, if you start seeing a lot of coyote come through, well, yeah, it is. If you've got it set up there for 2 weeks and don't see a coyote, might want to question it a little bit.
Sure.
People using, you'll set a trail cap right up on a trap, like say a coyote set, and it gives you the advantage of seeing exactly how that coyote works that set, which is hard to do unless you've got snow or a lot of mud. But this way you can see it, and you can actually see multiple different coyotes working the set, and they all work it a little different. That gives you the option of fine-tuning where you put your bait and lure, where you place your trap at the set. It can really cut the learning curve down some. I know nuisance trappers use trail cams a lot because they can check them and see whether they've got an animal in a trap that might be 20 miles away from them, so they don't make unnecessary trips.
And with the new cell cameras, that even, expedites that whole process as well, and saves time, and not even have to go to the camera and pull the card and check it. So,
without a doubt.
No, that's interesting. I just wanted, your philosophy as it relates to how you use game cameras and trail cameras for trapping, and what some of your colleagues and fellow trappers do. So that's helpful. Well, listen, let's talk about really, where people can get more involved who want to get into trapping. They've never done it, or they do it and just dabble in it and want to get more involved into different associations, and, how they can participate and follow some of the, things that you're doing in the content. So let's, take a minute here, and you can just tell everybody, how to get more involved in some of the organizations and, go down that path.
Well, the numbers are scary. It's hard to get exact numbers because in some states, if you're a landowner, you don't have to get a license and all sorts of stuff like that. But there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 175,000 trappers across the country. There's 2 national organizations, and between those, and lots of people belong to both, with that caveat. And between those organizations, they've got somewhere between 14 and 15,000 members, which means it's likely probably more like, 11 or 12, because like I said, a lot of people belong to both. So those few trappers are pulling the weight for the rest of the 175,000. And there is a concerted attack on trappers. Anti-trappers see us as low-hanging fruit. And that's an entry into, if they can get trapping banned, then they have the ability, they've got an organization in that state, they've been successful, they can raise money, they can get new people, and they go after stuff like hunting. I mean, they're not done. Mm-hmm. They're going to keep going. So between and that's the other thing, there's a lot of lawsuits. There'll be the antis will file against, you can't trap in Maine because there's a chance of an incidental catch of a lynx, which is an endangered species. So they try to shut down all trapping. Well, the national organizations are really the only people that can help with that. I mean, usually the state organizations are small and they get fairly overwhelmed quickly, but you get somebody like the NTA will step in and they will help pay to fight the lawsuit, or they'll pay to fight it entirely for them. Well, that takes money, and the only money that they've got coming in is memberships.
Got it.
The other thing is politically. You go to a state representative in Illinois, and you say, I'm with the Illinois Trappers Association, and we don't like this bill, and we want you to vote against it. The very first question they're going to ask you is, well, how many members do you have in our district? You're going to get you say you got 20, you're going to get laughed out of the office.
Correct.
I mean, why should if he's got 1,000 members in his district that are against the bill and only 20 that are for it, it's a pretty easy decision for him.
Sure.
So all these organizations really need to build up their membership. I can't tell you how important it is for the state associations and the national associations to have the money to fight the anti-trappers. And it just doesn't go away. It's every single year. You'll have it's like playing whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
You'll have something pop up in this state, you'll beat it. Well, it pops up in 2 others.
Sure.
And eventually they will find a weakness, and they will find a state, and they'll be successful. They banned all trapping but cage trapping in Colorado. They banned all trapping in New Jersey. I mean, there are states that they've been very successful in, and then they use that model, take it to the next state, and see if they can win there. It's discouraging because I wish people that love trapping or want to be out there in the field would understand how important it is for them to spend the price of a coyote pelt and join these organizations,
Well, I mean, I can hear the passion in your voice and how important it is. And you've lived this for years. And so, I think the message is great. And anybody that's listening that has a passion for trapping or wants to get involved, and, just like you said, research those associations, get involved in their local state, and really participate. Because as you said, there's a need for it. And that support is critical to the future of trapping. So I'm glad you shared that. Anything else that you'd like to share with the audience as far as how to follow any of your information, or other organizations that you think provide really solid information for those in the field?
Like I said, I would have really liked to push the National Trappers Association and Fur Takers of America. They're both state or national trapping organizations, but they've kind of each built their own niche. The National Trappers Association deals with lots of lawsuits and legislation, and Fur Takers of America deals with a lot of education.
Okay.
In other words, trying to teach people trapping's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. It's sustainable harvest. Fur is green. I mean, it's not like nylon, which you're making out of petrochemicals,
correct,
and then thrown in a landfill. And probably more importantly, search out and join your state associations. They need members so bad, and they need the revenue so bad, or we're just going to lose trapping rights. I don't know what else to say. I work at both levels, at the state and the national level, and each has its place.
Well, I mean, it makes perfect sense, and so I appreciate you sharing that, and for people to get involved, and just in general about your experience with trapping. So, Ken, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today, and I personally learned some, key information, and hopefully those that are, wanting to get started and or are doing this got a few extra pearls as well. So, hopefully we'll have another opportunity to, continue this dialogue. But I wish you a very successful rest of the winter, and again, appreciate your time today.
Well, thanks, Brian. I appreciate the opportunity, and I'd love to talk with you again.
Sounds good. You have a good afternoon.
You too.
Don't forget to visit spypoint.com/project for all the latest from Project SpyPoint, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube for all the latest on SpyPoint trail cameras and the outdoors.